I heard a rattle in the pipes the moment I stepped inside. That was the first sign something was off. Nobody usually runs the water at that hour. I remember standing there with the paper bag in my hand, that blueberry pie inside, still warm from the bakery. I'd left work early, feeling a little smug about surprising her. Thought maybe we'd sit at the table, have a slice each, talk about nothing. God knows we'd spend most nights in silence anyway. But I wanted to try something different that day. Been a while since I'd bought her something she really liked. Blueberry was her favorite, used to be mine too. I took a few more steps down the hall. Our house isn't big, and the floor creaks when you so much as exhale. Normally she'd call out, "That you?" she'd say. But all I heard was the low hum from the kettle. It was one of those electric ones, always sounded like it was about to explode if you didn't catch it in time. I set the pie on the little console table by the wall, next to a stack of old bills and a dusty picture of us from some 4th of July party we'd gone to years back. My stomach felt odd. Hard to explain, like a slow twist. No reason for it. Or maybe every reason for it. Sometimes you know before you actually know you know? I walked toward the kitchen, half expecting her to pop out and say something about me coming home so soon. The counters were empty, a mug was on the table, and the kettle's indicator light blinked red. I pressed the switch to turn it off. The house felt too quiet. I can't say how I knew, but I did. Something was wrong. I just didn't have a name for it yet. Maybe it was the way the air felt. Too thick, like it was holding its breath. I thought about calling her name. Instead, I stood in the kitchen, looking at the clock. 3 hours earlier than usual. The day's shift ended smoothly. My boss let me go, said I'd been pushing too hard and needed some time. So I'd stopped at the bakery on the way back, the one by the gas station, where she'd once told me they made the best blueberry pies. I was trying. Even after everything, the arguments, the cold nights, her turning over in bed, away from me. I was still trying. I walked to the bedroom door. I could see a sliver of the mirror inside, the one she always turned toward the closet so it wouldn't reflect light in the morning. The door was slightly open, enough for me to hear the faint rustle of sheets. That's when it happened. I saw her first, saw the smooth outline of her back, the shoulder blades shifting. She was on top of him. Her hair was all messy, the way it looks when she steps out of the shower and doesn't bother with a towel right away. Then I locked eyes with him. He was half propped up against the headboard. And he stared right at me, didn't look away. For a second, I couldn't move. I noticed he didn't push her off or pretend to hide. He kept his hold on her. Like he was waiting for me. She didn't even turn around. Maybe she was too lost in it. Or maybe he was holding her in place, I don't know. But he just stared, breathing heavy. Something behind his eyes told me he'd imagined this moment. The second I caught on to that, a sick chill ran up my spine. I didn't say a word. My head went kind of hot, but my chest was cold, if that makes any sense. I stepped back, out of view, holding my breath, then turned and walked back to the kitchen. I could have screamed, could have grabbed him, or her, or both. But I didn't. The blood pounded behind my eyes, but my mouth stayed shut. I just slid the pie to the center of the table, like I was setting a place for someone. Everything slowed down. Even the hum of the kettle had stopped. There was only this ringing in my ears. I opened the pantry. My hands shook a bit, but I tried not to focus on that. I spotted this old box, the one we'd kept his things in. Because he'd been with us for a while after the accident, she said it was the right thing to do, help him recover, no place for him to go. So his stuff ended up in a corner behind the cereal, and some cleaning supplies. A pair of his running shoes. A windbreaker. A battered portable CD player that used to be bright blue but was scuffed all over. I remember seeing it every day for months, then forgetting about it. Now it felt like it was mocking me. I dragged that box out. My back complained. A man my age shouldn't be hauling stuff around in anger, but I did it anyway. I was careful not to knock over the pie. I took the box out through the sliding glass door onto the veranda, spilled the contents on the wooden boards. The day was cloudy, no direct sun, but it felt hot. My face was burning. That's when I decided I couldn't leave it at just dumping his stuff. I needed to do something that would stick in his mind. I thought about throwing it all into a fire pit, but we didn't have one. We used to talk about installing a small brick fire ring out back, never got around to it. Then I remembered the old shed. It's a short walk across the backyard, maybe 15 steps if you count them slow. I found the axe leaning against the wall, next to the rake and the shovel. It was dull, handle chipped, but it'd do. I came back to the veranda and just stood over that CD player. For a moment, I wondered if he'd run out here to stop me. But he didn't, or not yet. I raised the axe above my head, took a breath, and brought it down. The plastic cracked, bits of metal and circuit board snapped. I did it again, and again, until it split in two like a busted clamshell. My strikes were measured, not wild. I wanted him to hear each one. Suddenly, I heard the sliding door open. He stepped out, barefoot, half naked, holding up his pants with one hand. He had this grin on his face, like he was trying to play it cool, or maybe he found it funny. I don't know. It was a strange kind of laugh, with no real sound behind it. I looked at him the way you'd look at a dead mouse you find under your couch, disgusted, yes, but also done with it. No fight left in me, just a quiet kind of anger. He said something like, "Hey, easy now." Or maybe it was, "Take it easy, man." I can't recall exactly, my ears were buzzing. I stared at him, kept my hands on the axe handle. I wanted to say 1,000 things, wanted to scream at him for messing my life up, for taking her away, for humiliating me in my own home. But the only words that came out were, "1 hour. That's all." My voice cracked a bit, but I didn't repeat it. Didn't need to. He nodded, or maybe he just blinked. I turned and walked past him, back inside. I grabbed my car keys from the hook by the fridge. My eyes landed on the blueberry pie for a second. I almost wanted to smash that too. But I left it there, sitting pretty in its cardboard box, top still folded open. Something about it felt like the saddest thing in the world, me trying to bring her a favorite treat on the day she was in bed with him. I walked out to my truck, started the engine. My arms were shaking, and I gripped the wheel until my knuckles went white. I didn't look back at the house. I felt raw, numb, all at once. It's a short drive from our place to the nearest motel, maybe 10 minutes. But I drove around for an hour before I pulled up there. I needed to get away, let the rage settle. Otherwise, I knew I might do something worse than smash a damn CD player. That first night at the motel, I drank until my eyes couldn't focus on the TV. I didn't let myself think about details, their skin, the sweat, the fact that she moaned for him in our bed. But it was there, under the surface, a roiling burn I couldn't name. I sipped cheap whiskey out of a plastic cup. At one point, I caught my reflection in the bathroom mirror. I looked gray, empty. I turned off the lights and sat in the dark. Then I woke up the next day with a migraine that nearly split my skull. I drank some more. Couldn't face myself in the mirror. I didn't call her. She didn't call me. 2 days passed in a kind of blur. The motel had that stale smell of old cigarettes, and the faucet dripped. I kept the TV on silent most of the time, just for the light it threw on the walls at night. I don't remember sleeping much. Mostly I just lay on the bed, or sat on the floor with my back against the wall, trying to figure out when exactly I'd lost her. Or if I ever really had her to begin with. By the end of the second day, I was out of whiskey. My money was running low, too. I got in the truck and drove to the house, not knowing if she'd still be there. My guts felt hollow, like I was heading for a funeral. But I needed to see. I needed to see if he'd kept his 1-hour deadline, or if she'd chosen him over me. Funny how that matters in a moment like that, but it does. I pulled up. The veranda was empty, no sign of that box or the broken CD player. The house looked quiet, just how I'd left it. I sat in the truck for a good 10 minutes, engine running, radio off. Finally, I killed the ignition and walked to the door. A part of me wanted to find it locked. But it wasn't. I stepped inside. The living room was neat, lights off, blinds half drawn. I heard nothing. Then I saw the pie box on the table. Untouched. She'd left it there, I guess. The inside was still closed up, no slices taken. A few ants crawled on the corners. It was late afternoon. I stood in the living room, not sure if I was going to call her name or head straight to bed. My mind was still foggy from all the drinking. That's when she came out from the hallway, wearing a plain shirt and jeans, hair tied up. Her face looked pale, her eyes rimmed red. She didn't say a word right then. Neither did I. She waited a few seconds, maybe wanting me to speak first. But I just stared at the floor. She cleared her throat and finally said, "We need to talk." I nodded, but my voice stayed stuck somewhere in my chest. We didn't talk that night. Instead, I walked right past her and into the bedroom, sank onto the bed. I couldn't sleep, though. I lay there until dawn, staring at the ceiling, my thoughts circling like vultures. By morning, I'd have to face whatever came next. But for now, I just felt numb. Part 2, 1000 words. We didn't talk until a week later. I mean, we crossed paths in the house, bathroom, kitchen, bedroom, but it was like living with a stranger. She never brought him up. I never asked. I was still numb from the motel weekend, still picking pieces of my pride off the floor. At night, I stared at the ceiling until my eyes burned, then I'd drift off for maybe an hour or two. I'd wake up drenched in sweat, my heart racing like I'd run a marathon in my sleep. Every now and then, I'd think about the day I found them. Specifically, I'd remember the look on his face when I caught him. That calm, almost mocking look. Like he'd been daring me to do something. I'd wonder if that was all planned, if she'd arranged for him to be there at that time, or if it was just fate playing one nasty joke on me. My mind was a mess of questions that I'd never speak aloud. Not to her, not to anyone. One afternoon, exactly a week after the day I smashed his CD player, she came into the living room while I was flipping channels on the TV. The volume was low, just enough to keep me from slipping into my own head. She walked over, stood between me and the screen. I remember noticing her hands were shaking a bit. She looked at me, and I looked at her. Then she said, "I'm pregnant." Just like that, 2 words that changed the air in the room. It felt like the floor dropped out from under me. We'd been trying for a child for about a year, give or take. Nothing ever happened. We visited doctors, got tested, tried pills, changed diets. Every negative result was like another stab in my gut, reminding me I was getting older, maybe too old for fatherhood. She'd cry sometimes, quietly, in the bathroom. I'd pretend not to notice. Couldn't handle the disappointment in her eyes. Then, out of nowhere, she's telling me she's pregnant, right after I catch her with him. I understood instantly what that meant, but I still hoped maybe, just maybe, it was mine. If not logically, then out of some crazy denial. I turned off the TV with the remote. The silence was thick. My chest felt squeezed, like I couldn't get a full breath in. She stood there, waiting for me to say something. All I could manage was a nod. I didn't trust myself to speak yet. She took that as a sign to keep going. "I don't want to lie to you," she said, voice trembling. "I'm pretty sure it's his." That last word, his, almost made me flinch. I wanted to stand up, wanted to yell, wanted to do something, but I stayed seated. My body felt glued to the couch. I stared at a spot on the floor, an old coffee stain, focusing on it because it was easier than looking at her. My mind was swirling. All that effort, all those months we tried, the hopes we had. And then this. I felt my eyes water, which only fueled my anger at myself. I swallowed hard and finally managed. "All right." It came out as a croak. She shifted on her feet, like she wanted me to say more, to ask a question or break down. But I just repeated, "All right." Nothing else. Her lips parted like she was about to apologize, but no sound came out. She looked tired, hollow, like she'd been living in her own personal hell for that week. But I couldn't comfort her. Maybe I should have, maybe that would have been the decent thing. But I couldn't. Everything inside me was snapping apart, and I didn't have the energy to hold her together too. She backed away a step, then turned and walked to the bedroom. I stared after her until the door clicked shut. Then I turned the TV back on, but I couldn't even process what was on the screen, just some daytime show with bright colors and laughing people. I felt like I was underwater, the sound muffled and distant. Eventually, I muted it again and sat there in silence, my heart thudding in my ears. That evening, I went out to the yard. I found myself pacing near the veranda, remembering how I'd smashed his things and told him to leave. The boards creaked under my weight, still marked by scratches from the axe. I wondered if he was somewhere nearby, maybe waiting for her to call him, to say, "I'm pregnant." too. Did he already know? Was he thrilled? Was he telling her to leave me? All these questions boiled in my head, but I had no answers. A couple days later, I went to the store for groceries. I just needed some bread, maybe a few cans of soup. I couldn't stand being in that house with her. My anger and shame were like a thick fog in every room. At least the store had fluorescent lights and people who didn't know me. I could pretend to be normal for a few minutes. As I walked down the aisle with the cereal, I spotted our neighbor from a few doors down, this older lady who always wore a big sweater no matter the weather. She raised a hand in a small wave. Normally, I might have ducked away. But I figured a quick hello wouldn't kill me. She came over, said something about how she hadn't seen me around. I shrugged, trying not to give away my mood. Then she lowered her voice and asked, "How's your friend doing?" I must have made a face, because she explained. "That young man who had the accident. He used to stay at your place, right?" I just shrugged again. I was hoping she'd get the hint and move on. But she didn't. She leaned in like she was sharing a secret. "Honey, I figured you must have known. He wasn't just a friend, was he? She visited him every single day in that hospital. Even before he came to stay with you. I remember, she'd get in her car like clockwork." Then, she paused, looked at me carefully. "You knew that, right?" I felt my stomach drop. I'd known about the hospital visits. She said she was volunteering, helping out a friend in need. But this neighbor's tone suggested something else. My mind replayed all the times she left the house with a bag of fresh clothes, or some excuse about seeing a cousin in town. Then the neighbor dropped another bomb. "He told my husband once he was heading straight for your place when he crashed. Said he was eager to see her. I just assumed you and she were both taking care of him, that you were close." Her eyes flickered with pity. "I'm sorry. I think I mumbled something, maybe. It's fine." And hurried away. My heart was hammering. In my head, puzzle pieces started forming a picture I never wanted to see. They'd been together longer than I realized. This wasn't some fling that happened out of the blue. She'd lied to me from the start. Lied about how he just had nowhere else to go. Lied about the visits, made it sound all charitable. And him crashing near our house that day wasn't random. He was coming for her. Probably always had been. I left the groceries where they were and walked straight to my truck, got in, and slammed the door. My hands trembled on the steering wheel. I was so mad I couldn't see straight. It was like the final kick in the teeth. They'd been playing me all along, using my home, my money, my kindness. And now there was a baby, and it sure as hell wasn't mine. My throat felt tight, tears of rage burning behind my eyes. I jammed the key into the ignition, started the engine, and just drove. I didn't go home. I didn't know where I was going. The roads were all a blur. Eventually, I found myself parking behind an old diner off the highway. I sat there for a while, face buried in my hands. I needed air, needed to breathe something that wasn't laced with betrayal. But nothing helped. My mind kept looping back to her pregnant belly, to him in my bed, to the neighbor's pitying face. I realized I couldn't stay in that house, couldn't look at her, couldn't face that reality without losing my mind. That night, I packed a duffel bag and headed out. I didn't say a word to her. She didn't try to stop me. Maybe she heard me rummaging in the closet, maybe she stood behind the door, I don't know. I didn't look. I just left. There was a place I knew, an old lake up north where my granddad used to keep a trailer. It was remote, no cell signal, just trees, water, and quiet. That's what I craved, silence so deep I could hear my own heart. So I drove. It was close to midnight by the time I got there. The trailer was still standing, although the windows were dusty and a few shingles had blown off the little awning. But it was shelter. I unlocked the door with a spare key we'd stashed under a rock. Inside, the smell of mildew hit me. I opened a window, let the night air in. Then I just sank onto the small cot and stared into the darkness. I could still taste the anger in my mouth, bitter and sharp. But here, at least, I didn't have to see her face or think about his smug grin. In the morning, I walked down to the lake. The water was calm, reflecting the gray sky overhead. I tried to wash off the sweat and grime from my drive. The water was cold as hell, but it cleared my head for a moment. I stood there, knee-deep, letting it numb me. No phone, no people, no reminders. If I stayed there long enough, maybe I could forget. Maybe I could bury that image of them together, bury the sound of her saying she was pregnant. But I knew I was just running away, knew the problems waited for me back home. Still, I had no plan except to stay in the woods and let time pass. Days blurred into nights. I had some canned food in the trailer, caught fish when I could. Occasionally, I'd drive out to the nearest store an hour away for supplies, but I never turned my phone on. It was a deliberate cutoff. A month passed like that. I figured she'd do what she wanted, if she wanted him, or if she wanted to keep the baby, or if she wanted to pack up and leave. I didn't care. Or I pretended not to. Eventually, something inside me said it was time to go back. Not to fix things, but to face them. Living out there started to feel too easy, like hiding. So I loaded up my bag, locked the trailer, and drove home, unsure what I'd find. Part of me expected an empty house, furniture gone, her clothes missing. Another part expected him to be there, waiting to throw it in my face. I had no clue which scenario would piss me off more. When I pulled up to the house, it looked the same as ever. The grass had grown a bit, patches of it turning yellow in the heat. I let myself in. Her shoes weren't by the door. A quick glance told me she wasn't around. The air was stale, like nobody had opened a window in weeks. I walked from room to room, just looking. The bed was made, the kitchen counters were wiped clean. Like she was preparing for something before she left. But there was no note, no explanation. I stood in the living room a while, wrestling with the quiet. A month in the woods had changed me, made me calmer on the surface, though the anger still sat heavy in my stomach. I figured I'd wait a day or two, see if she came back. If she did, we'd talk or fight or something. If she didn't, well, that'd be that. I sat on the couch, turned on the TV again, flipping through channels out of habit. Nothing felt real. 2 days later, I was out by the mailbox when the neighbor lady from up the block shuffled over. She said she'd seen my wife leave with a suitcase a week ago. Something about her sister in another state. Then she muttered something about the baby, but I didn't want to hear it. I told her I was fine, thanked her for the info, and went inside. Didn't matter to me where my wife was. She was out of my life. I felt a pang in my chest at the finality, but I pushed it down. That night, I made myself a sandwich and ate it at the kitchen table. I remembered the blueberry pie, that last act of me trying to do something nice. I thought about how she'd never even tasted it. The memory churned my stomach, but I managed to swallow the last bite of my sandwich. Then I washed the plate, dried it carefully, and put it in the cupboard. My hands were steady, which surprised me. Maybe the forest air had done some good. The next morning, I went into the garage, started organizing tools. I used to find comfort in little tasks like that, mindless chores that kept my hands busy and my head clear. That's when I found an old helmet on a shelf, dusty, scratched up. Brought back a wave of memories I'd rather forget. It belonged to him. He'd worn it when he first got out of the hospital, before he gave up riding for a while. Then it dawned on me, the rumor around town was he still loved bikes, but after the accident, he was short on money to get a new one. People like him don't stay off bikes forever. It's in their blood, that reckless streak. A plan started to form in my mind, slow at first, like a seed taking root. Something dark and cold. I hated the man. Hated how he'd flaunted it in my face, how he'd taken what was mine, how he'd laughed on the veranda. Hated how he'd left his junk in my house like he owned the place. And I realized in that moment I wasn't just angry, I was ready to do something about it. I can't say I was proud of that thought, but it was there, alive and coiled. I remembered a friend of a friend who dealt with scrap vehicles, sometimes sold them cheap. I picked up the phone, made a call. Took a couple days, but I finally found someone who knew where that old Yamaha of his had ended up. Some salvage yard on the outskirts of town. They said the frame was busted, but it could be fixed if someone had the patience. A little voice in the back of my head told me this was crazy, told me to let it go. But the louder voice said I needed this. Needed to settle something inside me that wouldn't quit. I drove out to the junkyard in my truck, found the Yamaha half buried under a pile of rusted metal. The yard owner recognized me. We'd gone to high school together. He asked what I wanted with a wrecked bike. I said I was just looking for parts, maybe to tinker around as a hobby. He shrugged, gave me a price. I paid cash, loaded it up on a trailer, and took it back home. My heart pounded the whole drive. I felt like a man on a mission, fueled by something bigger than sense. In my garage, I propped the bike up, started to see what was salvageable. The engine had issues, the brakes were shot, the fuel tank had a dent. It needed serious work. I'm not a mechanic, but I know enough to be dangerous. So I spent nights bent over that Yamaha, replacing parts, adjusting lines, cleaning out the rust. I poured my anger into every bolt I tightened. Some days I'd lose track of time, realize I'd skipped dinner, and it was well past midnight. But I kept going, fueled by this grim sense of purpose. Once I got it in decent shape, I took it for a quick test run in the back alley. It sputtered at first, but eventually roared to life. The engine felt strong enough. That's when I started thinking about how to make sure it wouldn't last, not for him. I had no illusions about what I was doing. This was a step beyond smashing a CD player. This was crossing a line that once crossed, there's no going back. I messed with the brakes, adjusted them so they'd fail at just the wrong time. Not immediately, but after a few uses. Enough to make him think everything was fine, then fail when he needed them most. I also added a little solvent to the fuel tank, something that would corrode the lines slowly, cause unpredictable stalling or maybe a sudden jolt. I told myself it'd be out of my hands how it played out. But deep down, I knew exactly what I intended. My hands shook more than once, but I pressed on. Something in me felt dead already. If I was damned, so be it. Then came the trickier part, making sure it got into his hands. I couldn't just show up at his door. The man hated me as much as I hated him, and he probably suspected I'd want payback. So I contacted a middleman, a guy I knew from the salvage yard connections. Paid him a little extra to present the bike as a steal, to the man who used to own it. Tell him it's his old Yamaha, mostly fixed, but cheap. I just need the money, no strings attached. My friend didn't ask many questions. Money talks, especially for folks who dwell in that scene. It took about a week for the sale to go through. One afternoon I got a call. He bought it. I remember gripping the phone so hard my knuckles went white. I asked, "He ride it yet?" My contact said, "Not yet, but he's pretty excited." I thanked him, hung up, and sat there at the kitchen table, feeling half sick, half relieved. This was real now. There was no turning back. I didn't know if it'd happen the next day or a month from now. But I knew him enough to know he wouldn't let that Yamaha collect dust. He'd be out on the road soon, testing it, showing off. It was who he was. I waited. Couldn't sleep much, kept pacing around the house. My mind replayed the image of her on top of him. Replayed the neighbor's words about how they'd been together before me. Replayed everything that had led me here. A couple of weeks passed without news. I started to wonder if maybe he was being cautious. Maybe he got the brakes checked. Maybe he suspected something. The tension got so bad I could barely eat. But then, on a late afternoon, I heard through the grapevine that there'd been a crash out on the highway. A bad one. A motorcyclist lost control, slammed into an oncoming truck. The chatter at the gas station was all about the bright red Yamaha and the poor bastard who was riding it. My whole body went cold. I knew before they even said his name. I heard folks say the front brake must have failed. Some said he died instantly, others said he suffered. The details were vague. But they mentioned the shattered windshield covered in blood, a stark image that stuck in my mind. Looked like a spray of red all over the asphalt, one guy said, shaking his head. I walked out of that gas station feeling like I was moving underwater. My heart hammered, but I kept my face straight, nodded like it was just another tragedy. Back in my truck, I sat behind the wheel and stared at my own reflection in the rearview mirror. I was pale, eyes sunken. In that moment, I realized there was no going back. If there was a soul in me left, it was stained for good. I took a deep breath, turned the key, and drove off, not sure where I was headed. The news would get to her eventually, maybe already had. Part of me felt nothing. Part of me felt something like relief, or maybe just an end to the constant, gnawing anger. But I sure as hell didn't feel proud. When I got home that night, the house was as silent as a tomb. The phone was blinking with a voicemail. I didn't listen to it. I went to bed and lay there, eyes on the ceiling, the echoes of that gas station chatter replaying in my head. He crashed. Heard he died instantly. So much blood. I'd never told anyone what I did to that bike, and I never would. This was my burden. My choice. My sin, if you want to call it that. For days after, I moved like a sleepwalker. I'd get up, make coffee, sit at the kitchen table, and stare at the mug until it went cold. It was impossible to ignore the finality of what I'd done. That man was gone. I kept expecting police or someone to come knocking, but no one did. It was ruled an accident, from what I could gather. A tragic mechanical failure. And he'd been known to ride hard, so folks didn't question it too much. I didn't talk to anyone except maybe a quick hello to a neighbor. The house felt heavier than ever. Every creak in the floorboards reminded me of the day I found them. Every reflection in a window made me jump, thinking I'd see him behind me. Nighttime was the worst. I'd wake up gasping for air, my heart pounding. Images of a motorcycle sliding across the pavement, a broken body pinned under it. Didn't matter if he deserved it, no one deserves that. But that's the path I chose. Then she called. I saw the number on my phone, recognized it was her sister's place. I almost didn't pick up. But my hand moved on its own. I put the phone to my ear and said, "Yeah?" Her voice was quiet. She asked if I'd heard. I said yes, I had. Long pause. She said, "I guess you're not surprised?" I didn't answer. Another long pause. Then she told me she'd be coming by to grab a few things. She didn't say anything about the baby, or about us, or about what I'd been up to. Just that she needed some clothes, some personal items. I said, "Fine." She showed up the next morning. Didn't knock, just let herself in with her key. I was in the living room, standing by the window. She walked in, gave me a glance that was more caution than anything else. She looked tired, older. The first thing I noticed was her belly, still small, but definitely there. A reminder of everything that happened. She said a flat hello, then went to the bedroom. I heard her rustling around in drawers, opening and closing closets. I stayed in the living room, arms crossed, leaning against the wall. The silence was suffocating, but I couldn't think of a single word to say. Part of me wanted to ask how she was coping. Part of me wanted to scream at her, blame her for everything. The rest of me just wanted her gone. She came out with a suitcase, her eyes darting around. Maybe she expected me to explode like I did that first time. But I didn't move. Finally she said, "I'm sorry." Just like that, 2 words. I let them hang in the air. I thought about the life we had, the trust she'd broken, and the fact that it all led to a man's death. Even though I knew it was me who'd set the final chain of events in motion, I wanted to hear her say more, wanted her to take some of the blame. But she just said, "I'm sorry," then turned toward the door. I guess that's all she had to offer. She paused for a moment with her hand on the doorknob, maybe hoping I'd say something back. I didn't. She slipped out, closing the door softly behind her. I felt no relief, just emptiness. That was probably the last time we'd be in the same room. The child she carried had nothing to do with me. I knew that. She knew that. There was nothing left to discuss. In the weeks that followed, I settled into a solitary routine. Wake up, stare at the ceiling, make coffee, pretend to drink it. Sometimes I'd go for a drive, circle the block a few times, come back. I avoided places where I might see acquaintances. The old neighbor lady tried to wave me down once, but I pretended not to notice. I didn't want sympathy, didn't want conversation. I just wanted to be left alone. Now and then, I'd think about turning myself in, admitting what I'd done. But how do you even start that conversation? "Hi, officer, I sabotaged a bike so a man would crash." People would think I was crazy. There was no evidence, no link to me, nothing but my own guilt. And he was gone. Telling the truth wouldn't bring him back or fix anything. It'd just bury me in legal trouble. So I kept it to myself, wearing it like a weight around my neck. One afternoon, I decided to clear out the garage. I trashed anything that reminded me of him, any leftover parts, any tool I'd used on that bike. Couldn't bear to see them anymore. I shoved them in black garbage bags, drove them to the dump. Tossed it all into a massive container, watched it disappear under heaps of old furniture and rotten trash. It felt symbolic, but it didn't make me feel better. The memories were inside me, not in some tools. Sometimes I found myself spacing out, remembering the details of that day I discovered them. The smell of the kettle boiling, the quiet of the house, the shape of her back against him. And then the methodical way I'd smashed his CD player. That calm rage in me. It was the same calm I'd felt when I tampered with the Yamaha. A part of me wondered if I'd always been that person, or if heartbreak turned me into him. I tried to think about how it all started. Where did the rot begin? Maybe it was the moment she chose him over me years ago. Maybe it was the first time I suspected she was lying about the hospital visits, but ignored the warning signs because I was afraid of losing her. Or maybe it was just the day I found them. That was the trigger that let me see the real shape of things. Doesn't matter now. The end is the end. Late one night, I stood in the backyard, staring up at the moon. I lit a cigarette, hadn't smoked in years, but found an old pack in a drawer. The taste was bitter, the smoke burned my lungs. I coughed, but I kept puffing. Sometimes the dog from next door barked, but otherwise it was silent. In that silence, I almost thought I heard an engine revving, the echo of a crash, a man's pained scream. My stomach twisted, I tossed the cigarette away. I never liked the dark that much, and now it felt suffocating. I went inside, flipped on the lights. The house seemed even emptier. At some point, you realize a home is more than walls and furniture, it's the people in it. Now the person I cared for was gone, and the person I hated was dead. I had the house to myself, but it didn't feel like a triumph. It felt like a hollow shell. I tried turning on some music, but it grated my nerves. I tried reading a book, couldn't focus. Sleep was the only thing that gave me reprieve, and even that was riddled with nightmares. A few days later, I heard from someone in town that there was a memorial service for him. A few of his biker friends were organizing it. I debated showing up, standing in the back maybe. Then I thought better of it. I'd have no reason to be there except to punish myself. The folks who knew him would probably wonder why I came. No good would come of it. So I stayed away, letting them mourn him however they saw fit. Sometimes I caught myself reliving the moment I told him. 1 hour. Wishing I'd just lunged at him, maybe taken a swing. Let him hit me back. Maybe we'd have brawled and gotten it out of our systems. Maybe I'd have ended up with a broken rib, but at least I wouldn't have crossed that line. But that's hindsight, and it doesn't change a damn thing. The days dragged on. I existed more than lived. That's when I realized a certain numbness was creeping in. The anger was still there, but it was losing its fire, replaced by a dull acceptance. I used to think acceptance would be a relief, but it's not. It's just gray. A gray that settles in your bones, makes you wonder if anything matters anymore. But I guess that was better than being consumed by hate every second. It was a step away from madness, maybe. I told myself that was progress. Time kept moving, whether I wanted it to or not. Eventually, the leaves started changing color, browns and reds sweeping through the trees around our neighborhood. I watched from the living room window as the wind blew them across my yard. A new season. A new reminder that life doesn't stop for anyone's grief or guilt. I lived alone in that house. She stayed with her sister, from what I heard, then probably went somewhere else. I never bothered to track her down. The child wasn't mine, so I felt I had no stake in any of it. There was a small pang in my chest when I thought about the baby, but it was overshadowed by everything else. Maybe in another life, I'd have been a father. But that version of me was gone the moment I found them. I tried to go back to work. Clocked in, did my job, clocked out. I was quieter than before. Folks noticed. But no one pried too hard. I wasn't the kind of man you ask personal questions. They probably assumed I was dealing with some domestic mess, maybe the divorce or separation. Small-town rumors likely did most of the talking. I didn't correct anyone. Didn't share details. I just went through the motions. Earn a paycheck, pay the bills, eat, sleep, repeat. The nights were still rough. I'd wake up, heart pounding, my mind replaying the sound of smashing plastic, or the image of that dented Yamaha. But I got better at pushing it aside. Sometimes I'd stand in front of the bathroom mirror, look into my own eyes, and say nothing. I wasn't sure who I saw there. A murderer? A man scorned? A fool who let his wife slip away to her old flame. It didn't matter. The mirror didn't talk back. One morning, I got a letter in the mail from a distant cousin. Some invitation to a family gathering down south. I almost tossed it, but then I thought maybe a change of scenery could help. But the more I considered it, the more I realized I couldn't run from myself. The forest didn't help me escape my ghosts. A family reunion sure as hell wouldn't either. So I trashed the envelope. I was past the point of wanting to pretend I could just shake this off. I tried to fix up the house, do small projects that we'd always put off. Painted the living room walls, replaced a cracked window, things like that. But each improvement felt pointless, like decorating a tomb. Still, it filled the hours. Sometimes, I'd catch a glimpse of her old perfume bottle on a shelf or some random note she'd scribbled. Little memories that stabbed at me with regret. Then I'd toss them out or stash them in a box. If I was going to keep living here, I couldn't have daily reminders of her. One weekend I decided to repair the old fence in the backyard. I'd bought some new planks, nails, a fresh can of sealant. While I was hammering away, the neighbor lady passed by, gave me a polite wave. I saw pity in her eyes again. I offered a curt nod, went back to work. She probably knew the whole story, or at least the gossip version. Folks around here had nothing better to do than talk. I wondered what they said behind closed doors. Maybe that I drove my wife away, that I was half crazy, that the poor man's death was just a tragic accident. I hammered harder, focusing on the rhythm to keep my thoughts at bay. That night, with the fence done, I sat on the veranda. The same place where I'd dumped his things and smashed that CD player. I remembered the way he stepped out, laughing, pants barely on. That memory felt distant, like a dream. But the anger it stirred was still fresh. Maybe it always would be. I'd have to carry it, along with the knowledge of what I'd done to him. That thought didn't make me flinch anymore, though. It was part of me. I was past hating myself. I just accepted it. Around midnight, I found myself talking out loud, as if he or she were there. I said something like, "You made a fool of me. But I guess I let you." My voice sounded foreign in the dark. I let the words fade. No reply, of course, just the rustle of wind through the trees. For a moment, I felt a strange sense of calm. Like I was finally admitting my own part in all of this. I'd turned a blind eye. I'd let him stay in my home. Maybe I'd even known, deep down, that they had history. But I chose ignorance, hoping love would just fix itself. I guess that's on me. The next morning, I got up, made myself some eggs, and realized I was out of coffee. So I drove to the store. Simple errands were still a challenge. I dreaded running into people I knew. But it was early, and the aisles were mostly empty. I grabbed some groceries, paid, headed back. On the drive, I passed the spot on the highway where his crash had happened. Couldn't avoid it. It was on the main route. There were still faint skid marks on the pavement. No flowers or crosses, though. Maybe his biker friends did something else to honor him. I slowed down, just for a second, scanning the roadside. It looked so ordinary, just a stretch of asphalt. Hard to believe a life ended there. I pressed the gas again, feeling my chest tighten. No tears came, though. I was dry. Spent. I drove home in silence, parked, brought the groceries in. No drama. Just day-to-day living. That's how it was now, a quiet existence tinted by everything that happened. Weeks turned into months. I hardly noticed the time. Work, home, occasional errands. I avoided any contact with her or her sister. Part of me was curious if she had the baby, if it was healthy, if she named it after him or something. But I never asked. I didn't want that knowledge. If it was a boy, a little version of him, I didn't need that haunting me. If it was a girl, same story. I kept my distance. One evening, I flipped through old pictures. Don't ask me why. Maybe I was testing myself, seeing if it still hurt to look at photos of us. In most of them, we looked happy. She had that bright smile, the kind that lights up a room. I looked younger, less weighed down. We were at barbecues, beaches, family gatherings. It felt like a different universe. I shut the album, stuck it in a drawer, and left it there. I didn't burn it or tear it up. Just put it away. Strangely, I started sleeping a bit better. Maybe because there was no more tension, no more anticipation. The worst had already happened. She was gone, he was gone, and I was left alone with my guilt. I'd made my choice, and it was done. No changing it. There's a kind of grim peace in finality. Sometimes I found myself standing in the backyard at dawn, watching the sky lighten, feeling that hush that comes right before the birds start chirping. In those moments, I felt almost human again. Then I'd remember everything, and my chest would tighten. But the wave of regret passed quicker than before. I guess that's how time works. Doesn't heal, exactly, but dulls the edges so you can handle them without cutting yourself open every day. I went on like that, day after day, until I finally realized this was my life now. I'd wake up, go to work, come home to an empty house, and carry a secret no one else would ever know. Sometimes I consider selling the place, starting fresh somewhere else. But I don't have the energy to pack up and move. Plus, it's my house. I built some of these walls, fixed the roof, painted the porch. Letting them take it away feels like another defeat. So I stay, living in the memories and the quiet. When I stand on the veranda, I remember the rage that once lit me up. Now it's just an echo, a dull ache behind my ribs. I'm not proud. Not sorry either. I just go on. Some nights, I catch myself whispering a prayer to nobody in particular, asking for, I don't even know. Forgiveness? Peace? Maybe just a chance to forget. But I know there's no real forgetting. There's only living with it, day by day, until you've lived enough days that it doesn't burn as bad. That's my punishment. Or maybe it's just the way life is when you cross lines you shouldn't. In the end, I'm here. Alone in this house, sipping coffee that grows cold too fast, wandering from room to room like a ghost. She's out there somewhere, carrying on, maybe raising that child, maybe not. He's in the ground, or scattered ashes, I'm not sure. And I'm just living. Because that's what you do after everything falls apart. You keep going. I don't have any grand speech or moral to sum it up. If I could go back, would I change something? Maybe. But it's too late for that now. That's the story. All of it. What else can I say? People do terrible things when they're hurt enough. Sometimes they regret it, sometimes they don't. Sometimes they just keep breathing, and the days turn into years. I guess that's me. This is my life, and I'm telling it like it is. There's no happy ending, no neat bow wrapped around it. It just is what it is, and I wake up each morning to live with it. That's all.